On the morning of March 16, 1968, American soldiers entered the Vietnamese village of My Lai and killed everyone they found. Not combatants, not fighters. 504 civilians, women, children, elderly men, murdered in a matter of hours, and the United States Army spent the next year and a half trying to make sure you never heard about it. What was lost matters. The soldiers of Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, had been in Vietnam for 3 months. They had lost men to booby traps and snipers, to an enemy they could rarely see and never quite reach. By the time they were told that My Lai was a Viet Cong stronghold, many of them were wound so tight that the briefing the night before felt less like an order and more like permission. Their commanding officer, Captain Ernest Medina, told them the village would be empty of civilians by the time they arrived, that anyone left was the enemy. Some of the men understood that to mean kill everyone. Medina later denied saying it. The bodies told a different story. They arrived at 7:30 in the morning. There was no resistance, no weapons cache, no fighters, just families eating breakfast. Old men in the fields, women preparing food, children. Lieutenant William Calley, commanding the 1st Platoon, ordered his men to open fire almost immediately. When some hesitated, he started shooting himself. The killing lasted approximately 4 hours, and during those 4 hours, what happened in that village was not warfare. It was something else entirely, and the men who did it knew it. There were ditches. That is the detail that does not leave you. Calley ordered groups of villagers herded into irrigation ditches and executed men, women, infants, and the soldiers complied. One survivor, Doba, recalled lying beneath the bodies of his family members, staying still for hours, listening. He was 8 years old. The fact that he lived was almost accidental. The killing was thorough enough that it should not have had survivors at all. And then it gets worse. The Army knew within days. Helicopter pilot Hugh Thompson, who had landed in My Lai during the massacre and physically placed himself between his crew and the soldiers to protect a group of civilians, filed a complaint that afternoon. He described what he saw. His superiors buried it. The official report described the operation as a military success. 128 Viet Cong killed in action, 3 weapons captured. The absurdity of that ratio, 3 weapons for 128 enemy dead, apparently troubled no one in the chain of command enough to ask a follow-up question. Or, if it did, no one asked it out loud. For 17 months, My Lai did not exist in the public record. Soldiers who had been there carried it home with them, into their marriages, their silences, their recurring nightmares. One veteran, Ron Riddenhauer, had not been present at the massacre, but had heard about it from men who were. He spent months gathering accounts, cross-referencing testimonies, building a picture of what had happened. In March 1969, exactly 1 year after the massacre, he sent a letter to the Pentagon, the State Department, and 30 members of Congress, detailing everything he had learned. The Army opened an investigation. Quietly. And then journalist Seymour Hersh broke the story in November 1969, and the country looked at itself and did not entirely like what it saw. 26 soldiers were charged with criminal offenses related to My Lai. 1 was convicted. William Calley was found guilty of murdering 22 civilians and sentenced to life in prison. He served 3.5 years, most of it under house arrest, before President Nixon reduced his sentence, and he was paroled. He later ran a jewelry store in Georgia. He gave occasional interviews. He outlived most of the discussion about what he did, what that verdict communicated, what the entire arc of the My Lai case communicated, was not that one man had been held responsible for the massacre. It was that one man had been offered as a sacrifice, so that the institution behind him did not have to be. Captain Medina was acquitted. The officers who buried Thompson's complaint were never charged. The system that produced Charlie Company, that trained them and deployed them and classified their crimes, emerged largely intact. This was not incompetence. This was a choice. Hugh Thompson, who had done the only unambiguously right thing that day, spent decades being treated as a traitor by other veterans. He received death threats. Dead animals were left on his porch. He was not awarded the Soldier's Medal for his actions at My Lai until 1998, 30 years later, and even then, several members of Congress protested the award. The man who tried to stop the killing was the one who had to fight for recognition. Cali received a standing ovation at a Chamber of Commerce luncheon in 1970. 504 people were killed in My Lai. Their names are on a memorial in the village. Most Americans could not name a single one. The massacre is not forgotten exactly. It appears in history textbooks, in academic papers, in the occasional documentary. But it has been processed into something manageable, something that happened and was dealt with, and is now safely in the past. What makes My Lai so difficult to sit with is not that it was an aberration. It is that the response to it, the cover-up, the single conviction, the parole, the standing ovation, suggests it was something the system was willing to absorb and survive. The dead do not get to weigh in on whether that is acceptable. That judgment falls to everyone else. If this episode made you think differently, subscribe. New episodes every week, and if you want to go deeper, there's more waiting for you.